This is Joseph Coco. I am at Handmade and Bound in Nashville, Tennessee on behalf of Becca Hilburn's Art Process blog. Keep on trucking out of soup. If you can introduce yourself, Matt.
I'm Matt Knieling.
Okay. And what brings you here this year?
Well, I'm showing off some of my artwork. I'm an illustrator and comic artist based in Cookeville, Tennessee. And I'm excited to be part of the show this year.
Okay. And the entire table is yours?
Yeah, everything here is made by me in one way or another.
Fantastic. Is this your first year at Handmade and Bound?
It's my first year showing. I've attended the last couple of years, and it's the first year I got up the gumption to actually fill out an application.
Okay. Yeah, it's quite a low barrier as far as I can recall for Handmade and Bound. It's around $30 a table, and you have up until about 2 weeks before the event, I think, in order to register. So it's a great starter show, I think, if you're comics or paper craft, bookmaking, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So are you local to the area?
I'm from Cookeville, which is about an hour east of Nashville. So it's enough so that I'm pretty familiar with Nashville, but not local.
Yeah. And how did you hear about the event initially?
I honestly can't remember. Like I said, I've been coming for a few years, and so I don't remember what got me out here the first time, but it was lucky because I really enjoyed it. I've come back every time.
Okay. And how would you describe the comic presence at the show? Becca's tried to make it here before. This is her first year actually tabling. We've had other events going on at this time. It's kind of a popular time for conventions. So would you say Handmade and Bound is like comics heavy, comics appropriate, comics light?
I would say right in the middle. I don't think it's comics heavy necessarily, but if you walk up and down the halls, I'd say one out of every 3 or 4 tables is going to have some sort of either comic art or actual comics at the table.
Sure.
And there's a lot of the things that cross over with comics. You've got zines and you've got poetry chat books and all that stuff where the line between one and the other is pretty slim usually. So.
Definitely.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's nice because it has a feel of being inclusive to all range of comics. I've seen a little bit of everything. I've seen, I've seen mangas. I've seen really, underground indie books. I've seen real edgy stuff. I've seen more mainstream looking things. So it's got a nice blend of that.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about your work? I see you have quite a few minis on the table. Is that something you just started picking up doing one day? Were you inspired by a friend or something to start making minis?
Yeah, I got my, like any kid that draws, I drew comics at some points when I was little, but the first formal comics I was really making were web comics.
Sure.
But I found that the web comics I was making, as opposed to doing a long form running story, I was doing short little tiny stories and then moving on to another completely unrelated tiny story, and that kind of brought me to the idea for my first website URL, Inanimate Shorts, because I had these tiny little short snippets. But I realized that was really perfectly suited to mini comics, and I like kind of having a self-contained bit of comic that is then finished, and then I can move on to the next thing. I have a little bit of a problem staying focused, I guess, on what I want to draw. Like you can see on there, sometimes I want to draw cowboys, sometimes I want to draw wizards, cute animals, what have you.
Okay. And I saw that you had some strips here. How did you get involved in that? I saw in the preface you were invited to, or maybe not invited, essentially offered a job to do some strips. And they weren't for money. They were just kind of for the experience. Interestingly enough, they were for the Tennessee Tech Oracle. I wasn't a student at the time, but I had been a student there, and a friend of mine was working on the paper. So you were familiar with campus, you knew about the life and the events that go on in the area? Yeah, and so I tried to make stuff that felt like it was specific to TTU. It was a lot of fun, it's one of those things, whenever you read a story of some well-accomplished cartoonist, they did a turn on their school paper, so it's fun to get a chance to say I did the same. Yeah, actually I haven't talked to too many artists who have been published in newspapers. It seems like it's a little bit of a dying thing for you to grow up with, you getting started in your local newspaper.
Sure. Well, the people I'm referencing aren't necessarily modern comics heroes, but people I'm a big fan of Dr. Seuss and Theodore Geisel. One of the first things he was doing was his school paper. So people like that, a lot of times they came up on a comic strip.
Okay. I was just thinking about that because you were talking about it. You lend yourself more to strip-based sort of things, short form. So, But I did want to ask you also. You are a professional librarian.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. My day job is a children's librarian, but that's kind of what I do in between things.
Okay, and you went to school for that, or it's something that you just kind of
Honestly,
decided?
no. I kind of got lucky with my particular library. I started working as a part-time clerk, and just through different openings and things, I was able to move up the ladder. But yeah,
Okay.
for most people, it is a matter of going and getting your library science masters and all that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's fantastic that you can just work your way into being a
Yeah,
librarian without having to go to
I
school
think that was
for
a pretty
4 to
rare
8 years.
occurrence. Yeah. But,
Sure. So as a librarian, I know Cooksville it's not that big of a town. It's probably not as large as Nashville, right?
Oh no, not nearly.
Okay.
I'm terrible with numbers, so I couldn't give you demographics. But
Yeah.
we've got a good sized university, and it's got a good blend of everything. It just isn't a large city on its own.
Okay. Do you have a mini comics collection actually in the library, or is it more of just traditional children's books sort of thing?
Yeah, like a mini comics library. We don't. I've seen some libraries that did that, and I love the idea. For our particular library, it just hasn't so far fit into what we do, but we do have a very large comics presence. We've got 4 different collections throughout the library at different age ranges. So we've got
Awesome.
graphic novels in your standard adult comics or adult nonfiction section. We've got them
Sure.
in young adult, the juvenile, and we even have like in the easy beginning reader stuff. There's some really cool books coming out that are accessible for kids that are just barely learning to read. They're also learning to read a comic, so it's
Nice.
helpful.
Yeah. Well, comics can certainly be helpful for that because you're guiding the reader along
Sure.
with pictographs illustrating what's happening. So, I mean, I think it's a little bit of an underappreciated art to teach children to read through comics because it's just grasping their attention and it's teaching them, the concept of these things are happening sequentially and.
Well, and it's there is also the act of like teaching them the act. You have to read a comic a little bit differently, and just like anything else, when you start on that young, the idea of flowing left to right, at least in Western comics, the way you process a series of bubbles, what order you should read things in, like that all. It takes a little bit of getting used to, and so if they've been doing that their entire life, they'll have a lot easier time with it.
Yeah.
Now
throw off the next generation of comic readers.
Exactly. Now that depends on the creators following those conventions. I don't know if everyone's reading exactly how to make their comics. So
I've certainly seen. I've read quite a few comics, and I've noticed when there's been a few flubs. I mean, I guess you might say.
Well, and it depends on how they did it. I think some people do it intentionally, and if that's what they're going for, that's awesome. If it's because they just hadn't, experienced the best way to get flow. I mean, everyone has to learn somehow.
Yeah.
These are the comics I have right now that I'm proud of, that I want to show everyone. There's quite a few comics I made that I didn't print out to bring to the show today. So
I understand. Everyone has their fair share of work they're not necessarily proud of. So, so in terms of yourself as an artist, do you feel like how long have you been a librarian?
I've been at the public library for a little over 7 years now.
Okay. And has that affected your work? I don't know how many minis you've made in the
Absolutely.
time.
I mean, I was doing comics before then, but it affected the style of art that I did, and it affected what I was exposed to. So just like any job, when you're handling books all day, you're going to flip through the books, and you're kind of basically shopping on the job. And for jobs that you're going to shop at, library is pretty great. So it was really excellent for giving me a wider range of influences and getting me to look at stuff that I wouldn't have normally. And it also definitely informed the kind of storybook feel of some of my work. Frolic Not the Mount was thoroughly influenced by a picture book, kind of fairy tale approach. Especially
I got that impression. It's a very cute story. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Thanks.
So, I mean, and you're saying those things, you're seeing them as positive influences in your work, or you feel like they've just crept in naturally?
No, I mean, they're definitely, specifically because I work in a children's library, that has affected what I do. I was never one to lean towards like
grotesque or hyper-violent.
I mean, grotesque things, I don't mind drawing scary-looking things, although I don't think
stylized
I do it very scarily.
is great.
But horrific stuff never really was my tendency, but it definitely kept me from drawing things that were, might be considered inappropriate by children, because in town when I do an art show, it's the kids that I know from the library that are coming by my table and looking at everything I do.
Yeah,
so there's a level of being under under a magnifying glass, but for the most part I think that's been really good for me. It helped me focus on what I wanted to do, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a guideline. It's another one of the things I like about mini comics. Doing like a foldy comic like this, I've got 8 pages. I've got to fit it in there, Now, is it because I do really large pictures? That'll work. But
yeah, they're definitely easy to read. So I can see also some of that shining through in your work of just trying to. I mean, in general, comic artists are trying to make things that are you can grasp without having to study them in any amount of time. But some of your work is like it's simplified in such a way that it doesn't look like you're trying to cut corners. It looks like you're trying to make something very readable.
Thank you. Yeah, some of my earlier work was very influenced by kind of slapsticky vaudeville type things. Completely silent, and it would just be a character running through a bunch of motions. And partially that was because I didn't have a script written, and partially it was because I didn't really like lettering. But it was also because I just kind of like showing action with action.
Okay. So would you have any advice to artists who are either interested in pursuing, well, I guess starting with interested in pursuing becoming a librarian? Because I know there's quite a few artists who they want a job associated with their day job, but they don't necessarily want to be a professional artist.
Yeah, well, I mean, the advice I would give would be to anyone hiring for a library to hire cartoonists and artists, because there's been a fair bit of my job that's decorating signs and doing flyers. That
sure, making the library very marketable and drawing those people in that might not otherwise come check out the library.
It wasn't on my job description, but it's what I enjoyed doing, and that was a talent I was able to bring to the library. And there's some jobs you don't necessarily. I've worked for people before when my hard work makes them more money, and you care about the business, but at the same time, it becomes hard to always incentivize yourself. When I'm working for the library, I never mind giving them 150% because I know it's going back into my community. I'm not doing it for profit. I'm doing it for the good of the area. So it's really easy to pour yourself into things and kind of volunteer a little bit and donate some of your effort that you aren't necessarily being reimbursed for. But it's a lot of fun. So for artists, by getting that job, I was able to spend time at the desk doodling, working on projects, even just talking about art with the kids, flipping through those children's books. There's so many graphic novelists that are also transitioning to doing some comics, so I'm getting exposed to all these different art styles, and that's helping build my style. So.
Okay. So when you say comics, you're specifically talking about something for a younger audience?
Not necessarily. I mean, my desk is in the children's department, but I see books throughout the whole library. But there are a lot of artists and creators that do the brunt of their work would be for an adult or a young adult audience, but they might do that one picture book, and so that's what comes across the desk. And so I can see that as well.
Okay. And so, I'm sorry, your advice for an artist who is considering trying to pursue being a librarian?
Oh, sure, I talked all the ways around that.
Oh, no, it's fine. I mean, you have great insight.
Go apply to your library. You might need a master's to be a librarian, but you probably won't need it to work at the desk. You can shelve books and check things out without extensive training. So a lot of times that's an entry-level job that you can get, and you kind of just get exposed to your library. And not for nothing, volunteering. It might not be a job, and if you can't afford to do that, that's understandable, but most libraries would really love to have someone that would be really consistently able to come in and do an arts program with the teens, or arts program with the youth, or even with the adults. Someone that wants to come in and talk about their work just as a one-time seminar would be really fascinating for them, I'm sure. So kind of put yourself out there and let them know that you're willing to help them, and they'll most likely call on you to do something.
So I know that your library in Cooksville puts on a week-long event called CAF, which is very comic book friendly. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the CCAF, or the Cookville Comic Arts Festival. Comic Arts Festival are popping up all over the place now. It's a very popular concept, and we're doing ours through the library. It's a completely free event, and it's kind of just our way to focus on our arts community and comics in general, bring attention to that as a medium. So we do all sorts of different activities. We kick it off on October 20, I believe it's 29th, with the, it's actually pre-existing event, the Halloween Comic Fest, which is a nationwide thing. It's kind of an affiliate of Free Comic Book Day. And our local comic book shop, Mountaintop Comics, does an event where he gives out free comics. There's local artists that come and do sketches for the kids. And the library's going to have a booth there, and we'll be talking up the week-long events. We're going to have a lecture by our featured artist, Chad Neighbors. He's going to come in and talk about his comics. And let's see, we'll probably do an art jam at some point where we encourage people to do works for our anthology that we do. Last year was the first one we've had it. It was a great little book. We encourage artists to do a 2-page story and submit it, and we collect them all together, print it all out. It's free for people to get. It was a really neat way to show the.
And this is for professional artists, or does anyone who wants?
It's open to anybody, and that was what I really enjoyed about it. We've got, I want to say it was 10 or 11 different submissions, and really cut across every demographic. You know, we had amateur artists, we had professional artists, we had young artists, we had older artists, all sorts of different styles. Some of them were goofy, some of them were serious, some of them were, you know, trailers for other projects. It was really, it was a great way to show the diversity of artists in our relatively small community and the people that are interested in comics. I know there was a point when I was arrogant enough to think I was the only guy making comics in Cookeville, and that absolutely wasn't the case. I just kind of kicked over enough rocks to find the other people that were doing it. So it's our way of trying to build that awareness. It all culminates on the 5th of November. That Saturday we do the PCL Comics Expo, and that's going to be like a small convention there at the library itself. We'll have tables set up for artists to show off their work and vend any of their wares. We usually try to do some discussion about comics as a forum. We really encourage anyone at any level that is making comics to be involved with something like that.
And what's been the turnout like for that in the past?
Pretty good. You know, it's a day-long event, and it's a little bit more of a come-and-go type thing. It's not really something people stick around for. Sure. So, you know, we've had several hundred come through in the past.
Fantastic.
Been really
and it's just people throughout the community, either walking by or already at the library or something like that.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of them were coming to the library to pick up their holds, and they just happen to see us, but there are a lot of people that make the trip just for it as well.
We just did Ann Arbor District Library Kids Read Comics event.
Excellent.
And there was quite a few people who were like, I didn't know this was going on, but I'm really excited because I love comics.
That's great.
So that's going to be happening in about a month from now. You're heavily involved in the preparation for that?
Yeah, very much so. I'm the one answering the emails on that, so if anyone's got any questions, feel free to shoot me a line.
Sure. And it's probably too late to table this year, but certainly if some people are interested in the area, interested in tabling in the future, or just interested in volunteering or something like that, they can contact me.
Very much so. Our focus with that is, it's not Cookeville specific, it's more kind of Upper Cumberland and the Middle Tennessee area artists. We're not against people from outside that area showing, but that is really what we're trying to focus on bringing awareness to.
Yeah, building community.
Yeah.
Okay. And I also wanted to ask you if you would have any advice to artists who are considering traveling a small distance to actually come to Handmade and Bound, similar to yourself, maybe a few minis to display. Would you have any advice for them?
Just as far as what they need to bring for tabling and things like that?
Just general advice. I mean, some things we didn't necessarily know was that there wasn't going to be a whole lot of space around here. We can use space on the walls, so just any advice that someone might not necessarily think of when they're coming to table.
I was lucky that I'd scouted this event in the past. I've been here. I wouldn't want to think that keeps people from going at all, but it's definitely easier to be confident if you've been to the event in the past. Come prepared for anything.
Just check it out, basically?
Yeah, or, a lot of times you can send an email or you can find photos online. For me, I bring a wide range of things. I didn't know if I'd be able to display everything, but I wanted to make sure I had enough to fill my table. I bring a veritable tool chest full of art stuff so that if there's something I need, I don't have to drive an hour to go get it. But I think it's better to show up and maybe be a little bit unprepared and not quite have everything perfect than to not do the show at all.
Okay. And for people who are interested in having library comic book event in their community, but aren't necessarily librarians, would you have any advice to how maybe an artist might be able to reach out to a local library to try to get something started?
I think that's it right there. They need to reach out. I think
Okay.
if you
So
start
just
showing
find
that
the right,
there's-
who would you recommend they contact? Just any librarian, or go to the front desk in person and say, who would I talk to if I want to start
usually,
this?
that's a good question. Ask who's in charge of programming. Say that you've got an idea for an event you would like to host, that you would like to have the library be involved with.
Okay.
A lot of libraries, if they're a certain size, they'll have a programming director. If not, there's probably someone that makes the calendar and handles,
Sure.
scheduling the meeting rooms and whatnot. If they don't want to be involved or can't be involved with hosting on their own, a lot of libraries just have like public meeting rooms that you can check out for free. You can host an event at your library. I think if by some chance my library hadn't been able to do this, I probably would have tried to do it anyways. It just wouldn't have been done underneath
Sure.
their mantle. So, but I'm really glad this is
Matt's
all.
Comic Book and Arts Festival.
I wouldn't want to have that much ego in it. I probably would have worked it into the acronym. I'm not sure.
I don't think MCAP is taken. You might be able to get that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and where can we find your work online, Matt?
I'm just like anybody. I try a little bit of everything. My big one's Tumblr. I'm Matt Knieling on Tumblr. That's Knieling, Knieling. You can also find me on Facebook at Inanimate Shorts. I've got a Twitter that is Matt Knieling. Between the two of those, I try to be on most services, but Tumblr is the big one that I update on.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for talking to us.
Yeah,
I really
absolutely.
appreciate some of your insight.
Yeah, it was great talking with you.
Have a good day.
You too.